It was supposed to be just another awards night in Los Angeles. Flashbulbs, red carpet, political jabs wrapped in irony, a parade of faces, famous, filtered, forgettable. The elite are celebrating themselves, until the cameras caught someone unexpected. Karoline Leavitt had arrived, White House Press Secretary, one of the youngest in U.S. history, unapologetically conservative, sharp as a blade at the podium. But this time she wasn't behind a seal or flanked by flags. She was stepping onto Hollywood's turf, and she wasn't alone. At her side was her husband, Nathan Demers, a real estate magnate with high-rises under his name and decades of grit behind his handshake. 32 years her senior. Not a celebrity, not a pundit, just powerful in a way that couldn't be faked. People noticed. "Is that her security?" one whispered. "No," came the answer. "That's her husband. He owns half of downtown Boston." Inside, the crowd buzzed. A ripple of recognition and confusion. The political world and the entertainment machine weren't supposed to overlap like this, but they had, and that overlap was about to combust. Then the lights dimmed, the stage brightened, and out walked the host of the night, George Clooney, charisma incarnate, smarter than the script, famous for turning charm and political activism into cultural currency. He grinned as the audience roared. "Good evening, everyone," he began. "We've got actors, activists, and enough Botox in this room to stop time itself. And hey, special shout-out to tonight's political guest star." He paused for effect. White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt. She's here, folks. The woman who turned the press briefing room into a battlefield. And she's brought along a man who looks like he just wandered off the set of Succession, Extended Family Edition. Laughter. Some loud, some nervous. Caroline's expression didn't shift. Nathan sat calmly beside her, unmoved. But George wasn't finished. Honestly, when I saw him walk in, I thought he was her finance guy. Or maybe her bodyguard/dad. Then I saw the wedding ring. She married him? I guess real estate really is about location. Location, location. That one landed hard. The room broke into louder laughter. Some clapped, others winced. Karoline didn't flinch, but her husband's jaw tensed. Just once. Quietly. He leaned over. "You all right?" She nodded. "I'm fine," but he's not. George moved on with the script. More quips, more applause lines, but something had shifted in the air. He didn't see it yet, but he would. 15 minutes later, the lighting changed again. A new spotlight flared on the stage left. Unexpected, unscripted. From the shadows stepped Karoline. Even George blinked. "Karoline," he said, half laughing. Did we schedule this?" She took the spare mic. Didn't look at him. Looked at the crowd. "Well, since George brought me into the program, I thought I'd offer a few thoughts." The room stilled. "You know, it's easy to make jokes about people who don't live in your world. But tonight, George didn't just mock me. He mocked my husband, a man who spent 4 decades building homes and businesses, creating jobs, not punchlines." Now, the silence had weight. "I know I'm not your usual guest," she continued. "I'm not from this coast. I don't orbit Hollywood. I come from discipline, from public service, from people who believe respect isn't something you earn with applause, but with presence." The audience watched, unsure whether to clap or hold their breath. She glanced briefly at George. His grin had vanished. "And George," she added, voice level, "if you're going to compare my husband to a fictional character, at least pick one who wouldn't get steamrolled negotiating a zoning deal with him." That drew real laughter. Not polite, not scripted, real. Cheers rose from the back rows. A few industry veterans stood. Someone from a union table whistled. Karoline let the moment breathe. Then dropped her last line. "I don't need a movie to command a stage. I just need the truth." With that, she turned, walked off stage, no fanfare. Backstage, Nathan was waiting. "That was something," he said quietly. Karoline's eyes met his. That was restraint. Backstage, Karoline didn't gloat. The energy was different. Quiet. Purposeful. She sat beside her husband, Nathan Demers, 32 years her senior, a real estate titan with skyscrapers in 4 states and a presence that needed no introduction. He wasn't angry, just still. "You good?" he asked. She nodded once. He crossed a line. Across the stage, George Clooney was pacing. Producers whispered in his earpiece, "Let it go, George. Move on with the show." But he couldn't. Karoline's words hadn't just stung, they'd stuck. Clips were already hitting social media. "I don't need a blockbuster to command a stage. I just need the truth." That line was spreading like a brush fire. The camera had caught Nathan's expression too. Calm, unreadable. The internet noticed. George adjusted his cufflinks, forced a grin, and returned to the microphone. "Well," he said, voice smooth but tightened at the edges, "I guess I just got a lecture from the First Lady of Fox News." A few half-hearted laughs, mostly silence. "But hey," he pushed, "I respect the troops." "Truly. But let's not pretend being married to a man 3 decades older qualifies you to teach us about leadership." Oof. Gasps rippled through the room. Even his own table froze. Not bold, just off. Backstage, Nathan Demers stood slowly. "You want me to walk in there?" he asked Karoline. She didn't answer. She simply stood aside. Seconds later, the double doors opened again. This time, it was him. Nathan's entrance wasn't dramatic. It was deliberate, controlled. He walked straight down the center aisle, unhurried, unshaken, as the audience instinctively turned in their seats. George looked up, blinked. "Sir?" Nathan reached for the mic. The technician, stunned, handed it to him without hesitation. He turned to the crowd first, then looked George straight in the eye. "You can make jokes about age, about politics, about anything you want, but the moment you question my wife's leadership, it stopped being funny." The room was silent. "She earned her voice. You just act like you deserve yours." Boom. The mic was handed back. No flourish, no smirk. And Nathan Demers walked out. Not another word. But the message, it echoed like a thunderclap. By the time the awards cut to commercial, Twitter, now X, was already on fire. Hashtags like "She earned it," "Sit down, George," and "Doc Demers did," that were trending nationally. Clips of Nathan's silent walk and the viral line, "You just act like you deserve yours," were posted, reposted, remixed. Commentary exploded across every platform, not just from conservatives. CNN's Kyron read, "Veteran real estate mogul silences George Clooney with one line." Even Stephen Colbert, usually a Clooney ally, hesitated to defend him. Was it funny? I mean, yeah, until it wasn't. Karoline and Nathan didn't post, didn't tweet. They went home. The next morning, she brewed coffee while Nathan read the paper like it was just another Wednesday. "You realize you broke the internet last night," she said. Nathan smirked. "I didn't break anything. I just said what needed to be said." "That's exactly why it worked," she replied. Back in Los Angeles, George Clooney sat in his home office rewatching every angle of the clip. His name wasn't trending for a film. He was trending for being publicly humbled, and not by a rival actor but a woman half his age and a husband twice as grounded. His publicist barged in, holding a phone. "We need a narrative shift," she said. "We're losing the cultural moment." An intern popped in. "She hasn't even responded yet. That makes it worse. It's like she doesn't need to." That made George twitch. He picked up his phone and called his lawyer. The manila envelope arrived by courier to Karoline's White House Press Office. No label, no logo, just her name. Nathan sat across from her as she opened it. Inside, a notice of defamation concern. From George Clooney. The language was slick but sharp. The comments made by Ms. Leavitt and Mr. Demers have caused reputational damage. Failure to issue a public apology may result in legal action. Karoline let out a long breath, then smiled, not with fear, but with clarity. "He's really going there?" Nathan asked. She nodded. "He picked the wrong opponent." That night she didn't go on cable news. She didn't post a flashy rebuttal. She did something quieter, more dangerous. She opened an encrypted folder on an old flash drive. The folder name? Garrison 17. Nathan raised an eyebrow. "You're opening that?" "If he wants a public war," she said, "I'll give him a public record." The media storm didn't wait until morning. By midnight, Karoline Leavitt's unscripted moment had racked up 5 million views. Her husband's one-liner, "She earned her voice. You just act like you deserve yours," was trending in real time, quoted by anchors, comedians, and combat vets alike. But it wasn't just the line. It was the posture, the tone, the calm. People weren't used to a couple like this. Not loud, not angry, just immovable. Back in Washington, D.C., Karoline sat in her White House office, the letter from George Clooney's legal team spread open on her desk. Defamation notice. Nathan stood nearby, sipping his coffee like it was any other day. "They really think we're going to back down?" he asked. Karoline didn't answer. Instead, she reached for a small black flash drive tucked into a file folder labeled Garrison-17. Nathan's eyes narrowed. "You're opening that?" "If George wants to escalate," she said, "then let's talk about escalation." Inside the folder, archived emails, screenshots, schedules, call logs, meticulously compiled over the course of 4 years. Documents Karoline had kept from her time as a congressional aide. Files that no one ever thought would matter again. Except now, they did, because back in 2020, George Clooney had been scheduled to headline a major veteran housing fundraiser, an event co-hosted by a bipartisan coalition of lawmakers and military families. He'd confirmed, posted, posed for photos with a Marine amputee in preparation. Then, 3 days before the event, he backed out. No apology, no explanation, just silence. The event lost its main sponsor. Attendance dropped, donations tanked. The program nearly folded. At the time, Karoline had been a low-level staffer. She didn't have the authority to fight back, but she remembered the faces of the families who stayed, and she remembered the embarrassment. So she documented everything. Now she had the receipts. The next morning, Karoline's communications team drafted a tight, devastating statement. "We have received George Clooney's legal threat. As someone who documents truth for a living, I am not intimidated by celebrity lawsuits. But I am deeply interested in releasing full records regarding Mr. Clooney's withdrawal from a bipartisan veterans initiative in 2020, which left dozens of service families without promised funding and public support. If he would prefer a public conversation, I am happy to schedule one, on camera or in court. No hashtags, no memes, no spin, just the statement, and a still image of the flash drive marked Garrison-17. The internet didn't just react, it detonated. Conservative sites ran headlines like, "Press Secretary Strikes Back, Leavitt Challenges Clooney to Defend Record on Veterans." But it didn't stop there. Progressive platforms began asking questions too. NBC. Was George Clooney's 2020 Veterans no-show a branding move? MSNBC. Garrison Files. Did optics beat honor? Then came the personal stories. Veterans from the 2020 event began posting photos. One showed an empty VIP seat with a Clooney nameplate. Another showed Karoline, then unknown, handing out boxed lunches to families who had driven 8 hours to attend. A retired Navy SEAL wrote, "We were told he'd show. My kid still asks what happened. Karoline isn't lying. I was there." George's PR team scrambled. Interns flagged over 800 negative posts an hour. Crisis managers pitched Vanity Fair exclusives. One publicist suggested a heartfelt Instagram reel. George's voice cut through the noise. No apologies. But you don't understand, his lawyer said. She's not trying to win Twitter. She's building a legal case. She has dates, names, documentation. Then bury it, George growled. But it was too late. The story had outgrown spin. It wasn't about politics anymore. It was about something America was starving for: integrity. That night, Fox News aired a primetime segment featuring Karoline and Nathan side by side. The host didn't ask about policy. He asked about character. "When you walked off that stage," he said, "did you know this would become a cultural moment?" Karoline smiled faintly. "Number. We didn't walk in there to start a war. We walked in as a married couple. He insulted my husband, not just with a joke, but with arrogance. I responded with clarity. My husband responded with the truth." Nathan added quietly, "We didn't come to win a room. We came to remind people what it means to stand for each other." By morning, the tide had turned. Clooney's lawyers began backing off. Sponsors started distancing. Even his humanitarian supporters began to fracture online. Then came the unexpected twist, a rare public statement from Matt Damon. "I've known George for years. I respect him deeply. But I was invited to the 2020 Veterans event. I went. George didn't. I saw the disappointment. Karoline Leavitt spoke the truth. Some things matter more than brand." Mick dropped. Within hours, others followed suit. A-list actor, anonymous to Variety. "We've all seen Clooney bail on things that don't benefit his image. She just had the receipts." Hollywood producer tweeted, "Mocking a public servant's marriage, then threatening to sue when called out? That's not clever. That's cowardice." A left-leaning columnist wrote, "You don't have to like Karoline Leavitt's politics to admit the truth. Clooney lost the moment he made it personal." Meanwhile, Karoline remained silent. No retweets, no interviews. When asked if she saw Matt Damon's post, she said simply, "That took courage. I respect it." It started with a whisper. An anonymous blog post surfaced just 2 days after the Matt Damon statement went viral. No source, no evidence. Just a headline designed to sting, "Is Karoline Leavitt the patriot she pretends to be?" The article was vague and bitter. It hinted at internal staff drama in the White House, alleged emotional manipulation, and even suggested that Karoline had built her brand around her husband's image to curry public sympathy. No quotes, no names, just shadows and speculation. But by noon, 3 more gossip sites picked it up. By evening, the hashtag number Leavitt Lies was trending, amplified by burner accounts, bots, and the same digital fingerprints that had shielded Hollywood scandals for years. Nathan Demers wasn't surprised. He had seen this kind of maneuver before in business. When someone couldn't win in the light, they fought from the shadows. "They're coming hard," he said, placing his phone in front of Karoline. She scrolled through the headlines, unimpressed. "This isn't journalism," she said. "This is desperation." "Do we respond?" "Not yet. I want them to think it's working." Because what George Clooney didn't know, what no one on his team understood, was that Karoline had anticipated this. She had seen what they did to other women: whistleblowers, staffers, press secretaries, dissenters. She watched as they were labeled emotional, unstable, opportunistic. So she'd prepared her counterstrike weeks ago, not with lawyers, with truth. Her team compiled internal employee satisfaction surveys from her time in both congressional and press offices, staff exit interviews, private letters from interns, mentors, junior aides, testimonies from military families she'd helped over the years. None of it had ever been published. Until now. She called the package Truth Over Spin. And when the moment was right, she posted one simple statement on X. "Some people fight in the open. Others fight from the shadows. I prefer receipts. Here's mine. Attached was a 2-minute video montage. Veterans hugging her at events. Young staffers thanked her for mentorship. A retired general saying, "Karoline Leavitt shows more honor in her pinky than most do in an entire career." There were clips of her testifying before Congress, footage of her helping clean flood debris in Kentucky, a quote from a Gold Star widow she'd privately supported, never posted, never publicized. The montage ended not with a slogan, but with a quiet moment. Karoline sitting in a community center with a young military wife, just listening. No cameras, no talking points, just humanity. The video hit 10 million views in under 6 hours. And Knock Leavitt Lies? It flipped, became number Leavitt Leads. Matt Damon reposted the video with 3 words. "This is integrity." That alone added 3 million more views. A former Obama speechwriter tweeted, "I don't agree with her politics, but she's walking into rooms that eat people alive and walking out stronger." A retired journalist posted, "I used to cover these awards. This wasn't about ideology. This was about ego, and she dismantled it with evidence." Meanwhile, inside George Clooney's inner circle, panic deepened. "She's not just pushing back," his lawyer muttered. "She's building a legal fortress." "She's winning hearts," added his publicist. "You've made her bigger." George stared at the video playing in a loop. Her voice, her calm. "She's dangerous," he muttered, not because she was loud, but because she was credible, and America was listening. 2 days later, the lawsuit disappeared. No press release, no retraction, just a quiet retreat. George's legal team filed a termination of proceedings. The defamation concern was withdrawn. No comment, no apology, just silence. But for Karoline Leavitt, that wasn't enough. At the annual Veterans Honor Summit in Virginia, where military families, retired generals, and volunteers gathered beneath one flag, Karoline stepped onto the podium. The sun glinted off her silver cross. The crowd stilled. Some expected a victory speech, a jab at Hollywood, a headline-making zinger. Instead, they got something else. "A few weeks ago," she began, "a man with power mocked the person I love most in this world. Not just his age, not just his success, but the values that define him, and me." Nathan sat in the front row, still as ever. "When we stood up, we weren't fighting for clout or applause. We were fighting for something that should never go out of style. Honor, faith, respect." The crowd erupted, but she raised her hand gently, and they quieted. This wasn't about George Clooney. This was about every woman told she was too young to lead. Every wife said she married for the wrong reasons. Every veteran who got a promise on camera. And silence when the lights turned off. "I didn't win because I shouted louder. I won because I refused to be silent." The audience rose in waves. Even journalists wiped away tears. Nathan watched from the edge of the stage. A letter from Matt Damon was read aloud. Courage isn't always on a battlefield. Sometimes it's standing still when the spotlight tries to erase you. That night, headlines shifted, again. From Target to Trailblazer, Karoline Leavitt ends Hollywood smear with grace. Not just Trump's voice, a voice for millions. Back in D.C., Karoline placed the flash drive labeled Garrison 17 back in her desk drawer. Not as a trophy, as a reminder. "I didn't win this because I'm perfect," she told Nathan quietly. "I won because I stood when others sat." And outside the window of her office, the spotlight had moved on. But the message stayed. Some people use microphones to entertain, others to inspire. Karoline? She used hers to remind a nation what character still looks like. It didn't end with the flash drive, or the speech, or even the lawsuit withdrawal. What happened that night, on stage, online, and across the country, didn't just put Karoline Leavitt in the spotlight. It redefined her, And for millions of Americans, especially the ones who'd never paid attention to a press secretary before, she became something bigger than a title. She became a mirror. The media's obsession evolved quickly. Outlets that once rolled their eyes now ran serious profiles. Who is Karoline Leavitt? The 20-something voice shaking up the White House and Hollywood. Leavitt versus Clooney, a case study in power, poise, and public perception. People weren't talking about her age anymore, or her marriage. They were talking about her backbone. Even former critics started rewriting their takes. A prominent liberal columnist tweeted, "She didn't cancel Clooney. She outclassed him. That's more effective than any boycott." College students clipped her speech into motivational TikToks. Veterans began calling her the secretary with a spine. And for once, the viral moment wasn't about who yelled the loudest. It was about who stood the strongest. Behind the scenes, Nathan Demers remained quiet. He didn't do interviews, didn't tweet, didn't write op-eds. He just supported her, silently, steadily. One journalist asked him during a rare off-camera moment, "How do you feel about being called the calmest man in politics?" Nathan smirked. "I'm not in politics. I'm just married to someone who knows how to handle fire without throwing gasoline." The clip alone went viral. The White House tried to stay neutral, but they couldn't ignore it. During a press gaggle, a reporter asked, "Ms. Leavitt, do you feel vindicated?" Karoline paused, then said, "I'm not here to be vindicated. I'm here to serve. If someone had told me this job meant fighting smear campaigns from multimillionaires, I wouldn't have hesitated. Because if I won't fight for respect in public, how can I expect the country to trust me in private?" A silence followed. Not awkward, reverent. Even CNN aired the clip. The White House switchboard received over 4,000 calls that day. Not complaints, thank yous. But not everyone was celebrating. Inside certain Hollywood circles, the fallout was intense. Agents whispered about Clooney's downward spiral. Studio executives quietly removed him from shortlists. He still had fans, still had money, but something had changed. He wasn't untouchable anymore. The moment Karoline walked back on stage, he lost more than a PR battle. He lost his narrative. Meanwhile, something unexpected happened. A bipartisan group of lawmakers, Republicans and Democrats, reached out to Karoline about launching a nonpartisan initiative for veteran transparency. Inspired by what she uncovered in the Garrison 17 files, they proposed a public database of celebrity and corporate veteran commitments. No more photo ops without follow-through, no more pledges without accountability. And they wanted her to lead it. Karoline met with Nathan the night the proposal was finalized. They didn't toast. They didn't even speak for a few minutes. They just sat in their kitchen. He finally looked over. "You ready for this?" She nodded. "The spotlight didn't scare me. But now I know it's not where power lives. It's what you do after the lights go off." The initiative launched with a single phrase. Honor is earned. Not marketed. It became a movement. Veterans spoke up. Donors showed up. Celebrities, real ones, began privately asking how they could help. For real this time. It wasn't politics. It was accountability. It wasn't anger. It was action. A year later, Karoline stood on the Capitol steps, not at a protest, not at a press conference, but at a bill signing. The Veterans Commitment Transparency Act passed with overwhelming support. Republicans, Democrats, Independents. The crowd applauded as the president signed it into law. Nathan stood beside her, hands folded, pride quiet but clear. When a reporter asked, "What started this journey?" Karoline simply said, "A joke, a spotlight, and a man who forgot that some women don't blink." That night, she returned home, sat at her desk, and pulled open the drawer. The flash drive labeled Garrison 17 sat there. She didn't need it anymore, but she didn't throw it away either. Nathan entered the room. "Still keeping it?" She nodded. "As a reminder." "Of Clooney?" No, she said, locking the drawer. Of the night the world figured out I didn't need to raise my voice to raise the bar. A new generation started asking questions about leadership, not just on screen or on Twitter, but in real life. And somewhere in a film studio, a screenwriter started scribbling a logline. She was the youngest press secretary in modern history. He was a real estate mogul 3 decades older. They walked into the lion's den, and walked out with the country behind them. Hollywood may not admit it, but Karoline Leavitt didn't just break the mold. She recast the lead. One night, one insult, one stands for truth. Karoline didn't fight to win headlines. She fought to remind us what character still looks like. Now it's your turn. What does honor mean to you? Drop it in the comments. The world's still listening.